5,000 job losses announced since the Abbott government swept to power in September will pale by comparison to what lies ahead, according to major Australian manufacturers. They say more than 100,000 jobs will soon be lost unless the government intervenes to solve a looming energy crisis, a gas shortage that is already pushing up gas prices for households and heavily job-laden industries. Strangely, Australia, meantime, is on track to become the world's largest exporter of gas in the next few years. So what's going wrong and what needs to be done about it? Greg Hoy reports.
This CSR factory at Ingleburn in Sydney is preparing to pull down its huge old chimney stack.
Well, it is a historic day. It's also a sad day. I mean, this plant was built in the 1980s.
After 30-odd years melting raw materials to make glass, this factory is shutting shop and retrenching its 150 staff, mostly because of its energy bills. The cost of gas, the lifeblood of this smelter, has tripled.
The factories like this, they just can't support that additional impost. For the people here, it's the saddest part, because if you think about the 150 people who worked here, it's not only their jobs. Those 150 people supported a family, they supported a community, they were part of the local soccer club, and now they're out looking for employment.
Just some of the collateral damage, the company says, of Australia's burning ambition to become the world's biggest exporter of gas, supplying fuel-starved Asian markets that will pay triple what Australians do for energy. A bonanza for gas producers.
It's a big opportunity for Australia. This is destined to be a huge boost to Australia's GDP over the next 20 to 25 and beyond, years and beyond.
But manufacturers say there's a downside that's being ignored.
One of the issues for Australia is that we've agreed to triple our gas exports. Nobody quite understood that that would mean that there wouldn't be enough gas available post-2016 to support local industries like this one.
We've got major companies that have survived the GFC that are now really under pressure to move their manufacturing offshore.
Sue Morfitt, chair of Manufacturing Australia, warns the consequences for the economy will be dire.
It could cost our GDP about $28 billion and 100,000 direct jobs, plus all the indirect jobs for people that service the manufacturing sector.
The head of global chemical giant Dow, Andrew Liveris, is one of Australia's most successful business exports. Born in Darwin, he is now co-chairman of Barack Obama's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership and chairman of the US Business Council.
Our Dow Australia factories here in Melbourne are seeing a doubling of gas prices when our contract expires here this year, which is going to render them pretty uncompetitive.
These huge new export facilities in Queensland are being constructed to service massive export licences, which were granted on the understanding they would source new supplies of coal seam gas. But they haven't found enough CSG. This, manufacturers say, is leading to shortages in their traditional gas supply. Gas exporters deny they're eating into local supply for manufacturers.
It's coming primarily from the CSG fields in Queensland.
But with respect, that's rubbish, isn't it? Because the industry itself says that these exporters do have a shortfall in gas and that they're buying up domestic supplies as fast as they can to fill that shortfall.
There's not a shortfall at the moment because the projects haven't actually ramped up into full production. They're still under construction.
Manufacturers say, however, big gas producers are already hoarding gas in preparation for exports. Gas producers deny this and say it's just a smokescreen.
The market is working. What we have, however, from Manufacturing Australia particularly, is essentially quite a protectionist proposal, which is trying to have gas supplied at preferred prices, lower prices, cheap gas, into one industry sector at the expense of the gas production industry.
gas producers say that you're effectively lying, or at best exaggerating, and that you're simply trying to drive down the cost of gas.
Why should Australia pay Korea prices and Japanese prices for its domestic gas? The Australian domestic consumer should see the benefit of abundant supply. It's not a question of who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. I just ask anyone to look at the facts of domestic markets around the world.
In Australia, it means that we're right on the cusp of the entire country losing a huge investment wave in the chemical sector.
Australian businessman Grant Lukey is also searching for a factory site in America. Back home in Victoria, his company Coogee Energy makes methanol, a cleaner transport fuel. The Chinese simply can't get enough of it. So Coogee is about to build a $1 billion plant, but must build it in America to get enough affordable gas.
Australia no longer is that attractive. And it's particularly around the changing dynamics of the gas market.
In the United States, they've also got rules, for example, on oil, that they should not export any of their oil. On gas, the Department of Energy, by rule of law, has something called the public interest. It will not export gas if it's not in the public interest. So the debates that are going on in the United States right now is how much of the gas to let loose.
Australian manufacturers say quarantining gas to promote local industry is also happening in other countries.
Canada, Israel, Qatar, the USA, they have all had a full review of what they can use their gas for domestically before they have allowed export. Israel holds back 60% of their gas for domestic value add. Canada does exactly the same thing. USA have only just allowed export after they've allowed their domestic market to fully flourish.
Manufacturing Australia is calling for a national interest test. It points out that Western Australia has already adopted a policy of reserving 15% of its gas for use in WA.
This is an interference with the way in which demand and supply should operate. It's an increase in costs in being able to supply into the West Australian marketplace.
Andrew Liveris is taking his message to Canberra. His meetings with the federal government this week were private, but there's little doubt what stern question was raised.
I think this next period of time, you will not like the answer as the Alcoas and other companies start shutting down and you haven't got a plan to reskill your workforce to the advanced economy. And I think that pressure has arrived, and I think what will happen is the government will have to respond.
Greg Hoy with that report. In case you hadn't noticed, beards are back. No longer just the facial hair choice of bikers and ageing hippies, everyone from Oscar winners to sports stars are sporting Ned Kelly-style beards these days, and trendy barbershops are popping up all over the country. Riding high on the resurgence of facial hair is the Adelaide band, The Beards. 4 men with lustrous beards who only write songs about, you guessed it, beards. Monique Shafter reports.
When we started playing, a lot of people didn't have beards. It was a rather more beardless time.
2005?
Back in the mid-2000s.
A dark day for bearded people.
Hey, hey, it's a potato.